folks at Plymouth had a great idea back in 1964 when they took their practical and economical Valiant, gave it a fastback roofline with a big wraparound glass, a more aggressive grille, and they called it the Barracuda. The idea being that this would be a sporting car for the youth market that was very affordable. Unfortunately, a couple weeks later, some people from Ford introduced their version of the sporty economy car, and the Mustang became a sensation, stealing a lot of thunder in the marketplace. It was okay. Plymouth's team was undeterred. They went back to the drawing board, restyled the Barracuda for 1967, banishing all Valiant styling elements, and created a new car that was available as a coupe, a fastback, or a convertible. The car was well received in the marketplace, but unfortunately, that was also the year that Chevy introduced the Camaro, Pontiac introduced the Firebird, and even Mercury came out with the Cougar. The Plymouth team was still not going to be hindered, so back to the drawing board they went, this time with the direction to create an all-new personal coupe with aggressive styling and something that could accept any engine that the Chrysler Corporation put in a passenger car. The team decided to go and create the E-body, and what came out was the new Barracuda and its twin, the Dodge Challenger. Now this is a 1970 Cuda 340, and for 70, the Barracuda became the base model, the Cuda became the performance model. We're going to take a dive into the Cuda. It's one of the most legendary muscle cars from the classic era. We're going to show you why they're great, what they're all about, and some things to look out for if you're shopping for a Cuda for yourself. The new E-bodies really were great looking cars, and the styling holds up today. The Barracuda was offered as a hardtop coupe and a convertible. Now, the base model actually did come with fixed side glass here, but all Cudas that are hardtop have hardtop glass that all rolls down. Cudas came standard with the twin scoop performance hood, although in spite of the scoops, those are not functional. There's no ram air happening there. However, you could option the shaker hood, which had a big hood scoop attached to the engine that poked through a hole in the hood. That was available with the 446 barrel engine and the 340 engine, and it was standard if you ordered the Hemi. Up front, the new grille was argent on the Cuda with black grille slats and a red bar across the front that the Barracuda did not have. The road lamps up front were standard on Cuda, as were the hood pins, and there's a gilled rocker trim that also came on all Cudas. Vinyl top was a popular option, and you could get it in black, white, or green, and then there was also a gator grain top that Chrysler was offering that had the texture of alligator skin, and Plymouth was still doing the mod top with 2 different floral prints, which could be had on any Barracuda. They're pretty rare to find, but they were still available. Mirrors were standard as a handheld adjustable, but you could get a chrome remote, or you could get chrome racing style mirrors or body color racing style mirrors. Now, another popular styling element that was optional on the Cuda was this side stripe. Enthusiasts have come to call it the hockey stick stripe. At the end, it would have an engine call out with 340, 383, or 440, or if you optioned the Hemi, it would just say Hemi. Now, another really cool thing on the E-bodies were these door handles. They were only used on E-bodies, and they were used throughout the run from 70 to 74. But these flush mount units have the lock integrated, and they just take 2 fingers to lift up, and the door pops open. It's kind of neat. Modern styling didn't end outside on the E-body. The interior really was very forward-looking too. From this aggressively styled dashboard to the high back seats and the console with the riser around the shifter. Even the steering column with this corrugated impact absorbing section that was unique to the E-body. Even the steering wheels were unique to E-body in 1970. This was the standard wheel with a simulated wood rim. And there was another simulated wood wheel that had metal spokes and rim blow horn activation, and the horn cap in the center, which actually didn't activate the horn, had a Barracuda fish emblem on it. Now this car's got the standard gauge panel, even though it looks fairly sporting, but you could also option the rally dash that had 4 equally sized circular gauges, including a tack and an oil pressure gauge and a rally clock. Now the console was an option even on the Cuda, and you could get it with an automatic or a 4-speed. If you got the 4-speed, you got the really cool pistol grip Hirsch shifter that was standard with a 4-speed. If you got a 3-speed manual, which was available with some of the engines, you did not get a pistol grip. if you got the torque flight automatic, you got the slapstick shifter if you option the console, and that would allow you to ratchet up through the gears. If you did not get the console and you got an automatic, you'd get a column shifter. Bucket seats were standard, but you could get a bench type seat with a bench bottom and bucket style backs. Those are fairly rare, however. Now you could also option your Cuda with the Grand Coupe style leather interior. You could not combine the Grand Coupe and the Cuda, however, the way you could combine an RT and an SE on a Challenger. But if you ordered those leather bucket seats, you got the upgraded interior that included the molded headliner and overhead consolette. Now, some of the sales literature says you only got that headliner if you got the tan interior, but we've seen over the years many Cudas with Grand Coupe black leather seats that also have the consolette on top. Now, that little chrome bezel on the dash over there, that's a reverse warning light that Mopars came with if you got a manual transmission. You put the shifter in reverse and it lights up. There were a lot of options available inside the Cuda. You could get several different stereos, including one that had a microphone to record. You could get air conditioning, you could get power windows, you could get cruise control. One of the problems with the interior in the Cuda is that the materials were questionable from the factory, unfortunately, and stuff tended to deteriorate. One of the big problems was with the door panels. They're really big one-piece pieces of plastic, and they tended to degrade pretty quickly. And sometimes even from the factory, they didn't fit right. These days, it's not a huge problem because the aftermarket has made reproduction elements that are actually, in some cases, better than the originals. E-body interiors were really great looking, and they were also really comfortable as well, particularly compared to some of the earlier Mopars that came before them. The material issues that we talked about previously are not really an issue today because the performance aftermarket and restoration aftermarket has you covered. You can get pretty much anything you need to sort out any issues you might have in here. There were quite a few engines available in the Cuda for 1970. The standard offering was the 383 4-barrel rated at 335 horsepower. However, in an unusual move, Chrysler made the 340 a no-cost option, probably because it would have been a tough sell to get people to pay extra for a smaller engine with a lower horsepower rating. However, by 1970, a lot of people familiar with Chrysler cars knew that the 340 was a hot small block worth having. This car's got the 340 4-barrel. It's the standard version with 275 horsepower, and 1970 was the first time that that engine had been used in a car that was not an A-body. And in fact, this version of the engine has the A-body closed air cleaner with no snorkels and the A-body's driver's side exhaust manifold that was designed to clear the steering on those cars. On the B-body, E-body chassis that it's in here, you can see that it's not even necessary, but there it is. Later on in 71, that manifold would change, the air cleaner would change. But for 1970, this was really a solid offering, and at the end of the year, when everything was tallied up, Chrysler had sold almost as many 340 Cudas as it had sold 383 Cudas. Now you could also get the 440 4-barrel, the 440 6-barrel, or of course the 426 Hemi. There's another engine available in a special model called the Cuda AAR. AAR stood for All American Racers. That was Dan Gurney's racing outfit. He, of course, the famous racing driver who piloted a Cuda in the SCCA's Trans Am series for Chrysler that year. Swede Savage also drove a team car for All American Racers. The street homologation version of that car was called the Cuda AAR. Its counterpart at Dodge was the Challenger TA, and those cars got an exclusive 346 barrel engine that also had special cylinder heads and some other special parts. That car will probably get its own guide later on. Those cars also had fiberglass hoods and side exiting exhaust and some other cool things. But the regular Cuda with the 340 engine was a good package. Early in the year, Chrysler said that those cars would get 15 by 7-inch wheels and E60 tires, but after the production began, they went back to 14-inch wheels on those cars. It was almost as if the 340 Cuda was supposed to be the sports car offering of the lineup. The 440 4-barrel was unusual in that Chrysler actually sold more 6-barrel Cudas in 1970 than they did 4-barrels, so the 4-barrel was discontinued for 1971. Now, if you're looking at a Mopar muscle car, you know that numbers are a big deal. The numbers matching engine affects the value of the car significantly. But know that these are very easy cars to work on, and the aftermarket has really supported them well. So if you need to fix what isn't there or find parts you don't have, that shouldn't be too difficult. Another important thing to talk about in the engine bay of a classic Mopar is the trim tag. Chrysler Corporation used stamped metal tags attached to the inner fender to note all the production codes that were used on a particular car. They'll tell you what engine the car had, and the transmission, and the color, and a whole bunch of other option codes. Now those tags are reproduced, so if yours is missing, you can get another one made. However, it is important to note that that is not a VIN tag, and it's not the absolute be-all, end-all of what the car was built with, because you can get a replica tag. They're only held on with Phillips head screws. If you look at a car for sale and there's no tag there, ask the owner if they took it and hid it somewhere, because there is concern sometimes with those tags being stolen. It shows. Now, we mentioned the VIN tag. The VIN tag that you need to worry about is the one up under the windshield, and that should be held on with rosette rivets. If there's regular pop rivets in there, that could be a concern. That tag's not supposed to be disturbed. Another thing you should check if you're shopping for an E-body is this partial VIN stamped up here in the cowl, and there's another one in the radiator support. That one's kind of hard to see because the radiator's right in front of it, but it's good to check those things against the cowl tag and the VIN number to make sure everything jibes. Underneath the E-body is pretty typical Chrysler stuff for the time. Unit body construction, torsion bar suspension up front, leaf springs in the back, and a heavy steel K-frame up here to mount the engine, the suspension, and the steering. Now the K-frames are different depending on what engine the car came with. Slant 6, small block, big block, even the Hemi got its own K-frame, and those usually had the skid plate there to protect the extra deep oil pan. So the Cuda came with a performance-tuned suspension. It's got a front sway bar, and the torsion bars are a little heavier rate. They still depend on what engine you have. Tubular shock absorbers, power steering on this one, but that was an option even on the Cuda. Manual steering was standard. This one's also got front disc brakes. Those are a single piston design. That was new for 1970, but big drum brakes were standard on the Cuda, 11-inch units. As you move back, you get to the transmission. This car's got a 4-speed in it. We talked about the importance of numbers on classic Mopars and checking numbers and making sure stuff is original. On this 340 Cuda, there are numbers cast in the side of the block right up here. Behind the starter, it actually has 340 cast into it. Now there are other numbers there just below the cylinder head on the driver's side of the block. That will tell you some more stuff about what engine it is and the dates and where it was made. Now we know this is the original engine for this car, so we didn't bother checking those too heavily. If you step over on this side, on the passenger side of the engine, up here is a pad just above the oil pan rail, and stamped in that is the last digits of the VIN. And on this car, they are in fact the right digits. And back in the transmission, there's another pad cast into the side of the case, and there are numbers stamped into that as well. And again, you should find the last digits of the VIN. Again, this is the original engine for this car. It does not have its original transmission. If this was an automatic car, the torque flight would have the VIN stamped on a pad that's just on the passenger side of the bell housing. Cudas all came with dual exhaust. Now this car has an aftermarket system on it. It's from a company called TTI. They make really nice stuff for Mopars. It's 2.5 inch, it's got performance mufflers on it. But the factory exhaust system would have had 2 oval resonators here ahead of the axle in the normal position. And then behind the axle, they would have 2 round mufflers. And then Cudas usually have those 2 box tips poking through the rear valance that look really cool. Now we haven't talked about rust and rot yet. And with any muscle car from the classic era, that's a significant topic. Even more so when you're talking about a vintage Mopar, and especially on an E-body. Unfortunately, these cars were really prone to rot. Now underneath the middle of the car here, you can see this one has undercoating all over everything, and it's supposed to be a factory undercoat car. Now sometimes in magazines or car shows, you might have seen restored cars where the floor pans are entirely painted with body color with a really nice finish. That's not actually how they built these cars. What was normal was primer on the floor pans and colored overspray coming in from the sides where the original painter would have leaned over to paint the rocker panels. Now the rot issue is normal for floor pans, and you can buy the sections to weld those in on these cars. That's not too big of a deal. What gets to be more serious is when the unit body frame rails are rotten, and that did happen on these cars a lot, including this one in the middle that mounts the transmission cross member. It's the same one that the torsion bars anchor into. And sometimes when those would really get rotten, the torsion bar force would actually crush what was left of the rotted crossmember. You can buy all those sections and weld them in. There are other parts of the rear unit body frame rails that were prone to rotting through. And again, you can get all that stuff. And I think you can get one-piece floor pans for these cars. And you can do that work, but it's more a matter of knowing what you're getting when you're buying a car. Now, the standard rear axle you're gonna find in a Cuda is Chrysler's 8 3/4 unit. That's a heavy-duty unit that is a third member style, kind of like a Ford 9-inch. Chrysler made it for a long time, starting in 1957 and running up into the 70s. Most Cudas will come with 323 gears. Sure Grip was the name of Chrysler's limited slip differential. It was not standard on a Cuda, but it's a very commonly found option. Now, in the higher ends of the performance Cuda, you may find a Dana 60 rear end. That was an extra heavy-duty unit. If you got a Hemi with a 4-speed, you were getting a Dana, but you could option it in some of the other cars with some of the various axle packages that Chrysler offered. Danas all had limited slip. They were only available with 354 to 1 gears or 410 to 1 gears. But back to the 8 3/4, the center section is cast iron, and there's a few different cases that Chrysler used. This one is what they call the 489 case. That's the last 3 digits of the casting number. The 489 is a heavy-duty unit. It's a good one to find. The limited slip units were sometimes clutch type and sometimes cone type. The clutch type ones are rebuildable, the cone type ones are not, but the aftermarket has you covered there. We talked a little bit about the wheels that could come on a Cuda earlier. These are the Rally Road wheels. They were new for 1970 and they were available in 14 or 15-inch sizes. 14-inch would have been standard, although any Rally wheel was an option on a Cuda. Standard was a regular steel wheel with a little pie pan hubcap. You could upgrade from there to full wheel covers, and there were 2 styles of those, including a wire wheel cover. And then you could get into the Rally wheels. Now, there was also a styled road wheel, which is the style of wheel that looks like a Magnum 500. Those only came in 14-inch sizes. These are the 15-inch size Rally wheels. And if you got these, you were going to get the E60-15 tires, unless you got a Hemi, in which case the 15-inch wheels were standard, and an F60-15 tire would have been standard as well. On a Hemi car, if you didn't option the Rally wheels, you were still going to get 15-inch wheels. They were just going to be plain steel wheels with those big F60-15 tires and little hubcaps.
I've been driving this car a little bit, and the more I drive it, the more I like it. Vintage Mopars can kind of go one of 2 ways. Either they're really nice to drive for their period, or they can be like a rolling garbage can. You could say that about all cars of that period, but somehow Mopars just don't respond well to having bad things done to them. And by bad things, I mean either not having things set the way they should be, or putting some aftermarket parts on that don't really work well. Mopars don't tend to react well to air shocks, particularly if they're pumped up real high, or certain traction devices. A lot of Mopar guys like to put super stock leaf springs in these cars. They're great for drag racing, but they're really stiff on the street. Sometimes people will put really stiff aftermarket shock absorbers in that sometimes these cars don't like. This one is mostly the way Chrysler intended. It does have radial tires, and it's got modern gas shocks on it, but they're not super stiff. And it rides nicely and it steers well. This car does not have the fast ratio Cuda AAR steering linkage, and yet the steering feels fine, even with the big factory steering wheel. It feels good, actually. The brakes feel good with the factory power front discs. And this car, unlike a lot of earlier Mopars, you feel like you sit in this car, not on it. And it feels good. It does feel sporty. Chrysler, I think, was concerned at the time that using the B-body platform and making these cars a little larger than pony cars had traditionally been would make them drive like a big car. I would say this splits the difference well between a big period car and something like an early Mustang. It feels good. Now this car's got a little extra gear in it. The owner changed out the 323s to, I think, aftermarket 373s, and it makes it a little livelier, but it also makes it a little noisier when you're cruising along. The 4-speed, as is often the case, kind of makes the car a lot more fun, and the pistol grip is really cool. This feels good. Gauges are right in front of you. The seat is comfortable. I think Chrysler did a nice job on these cars, and today it's probably mostly a matter of finding a good car or finding a project that you can set right. And these cars get a lot of looks. I mean, we're driving around town just to get a little bit of footage here, and all heads turn when this thing goes by. And even people who don't really know a lot about cars, this car gets their attention. These things were sexy when they were new, and they haven't really lost that. Downside of E-bodies is you're not going to find one cheap. Even a project car is going to set you back. People like these, and there's just not enough of them to go around, so supply and demand dictates that you're going to have to pay. This car has almost doubled in value probably in the last 15 years, this 340 car. Not a bad thing if you're the guy that owns a car. It's a great place to park your money. It doesn't seem like E-bodies are going to start losing value anytime soon. They're premium muscle cars. When you go to auctions, these cars are still the ones that people get excited about. And if you can even find a rusty car, you can get so many of the parts, if you're so inclined, put it back together. It's probably going to be a good car to hang on to. There are certain cars throughout the years that are just good to have, like 32 Fords and 55 Chevys, and Mopar E-bodies probably on that list.
Looking for a Cuda or any other type of collector vehicle? Go to the Hemmings marketplace at hemmings.com, where you can browse thousands of listings for any vehicle you can dream of.